on the NewsChannel 5 network. This is OpenLine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to OpenLine. Glad you're with us tonight. It is Wednesday, April 22nd. We continue to talk all about the coronavirus, its impact on our city, our state, our world at this point. And tonight, an important conversation. We're talking about the metro budget. Of course, the mayor has already said that we are in dire straits, and that's not a surprise when you see that everything is shut down. What does that mean for the budget? What does it mean for a property tax increase? We want to talk about that tonight in detail, and of course give you a chance to talk about that. Call in with your questions or comments as well. Happy to have with us Bob Mendes, Councilman at Large. He's chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, and he's joining us via Zoom from his house. Councilman, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me.
So we've heard from the mayor already that we face a very dire budget situation. I want to get your assessment. Where do you think we are right now? How would you assess things?
Well, nationally, there are significant economic problems. We've seen unemployment spike over the last month in a literally unprecedented way. And we look around town and people are staying home, people aren't visiting. And the revenue shortfall from sales tax, alcohol taxes, and other fees, hotel, motel taxes, the shortfall is going to be into the hundreds of millions of dollars. So it is very serious.
So I feel like, okay, there are two questions we'll start with. One is, how do we finish out this budget year? And then we'll move into what do we do about next budget year and the potential property tax increase. But this budget year ends at the end of June, and we will have a shortfall. How do we manage that, and what sort of shortfall are we looking at?
So you told me I could be wonky, so I'm going to be a little bit wonky here. So the shortfall, the last estimate I heard was in the range of $230 million short of revenue for the current fiscal year. And you have to keep in mind that we headed into this problem with literally the worst rainy day fund of any big city in America. If we had the average rainy day fund, we would have had some $700 million set aside for a rainy day. Instead, we came into this with 50 or 60 million. So 50 or 60 million sounds like a lot, but that's almost no rainy day fund. The way, frankly, we're going to get through this fiscal year is by borrowing from ourselves. The city has money set aside for capital improvements. I think with the permission of the state comptroller, the city is going to borrow against those capital funds with the intent of paying them back out of next year's revenue.
So we borrow against ourselves to get through this, I guess, the first hurdle. Is there any thought about furloughs or layoffs, either with metro schools or with metro government? Is there any talk about that just in this first part to get through this year's fiscal year?
I think cities across America, and definitely in Nashville, are trying not to it would be a bad idea to machete to the city government. It would take longer to rebuild and maintaining them would be easier. So furloughs and eliminating positions and eliminating services really need to be a last resort because we do have a 700,000 person city that we have to continue to operate. So it's everything's on the table because of the dollar amount so big, but getting rid of people and services really needs to be a last resort.
I'm glad to hear you say that, and you're kind of cutting out a little bit, and so we went back to me for a second. But what I hear you saying is you don't want to take a machete to city government right now, and I guess you said everything's on the table, but that's not an immediate plan. We're not talking about mass layoffs, furloughs, that kind of thing. The hope is things will start back up fairly soon. And so I guess it sounded like, and again, you cut out a little bit, you're not talking about mass layoffs at this point.
That is true. And I just sent a text to my family to ask everybody to get off Netflix so maybe we could stream fewer videos simultaneously.
Wow. See, yeah, because
so
we're going to get really
cut.
wonky here. We're going to get wonky. And yeah, if they're streaming Netflix, that's going to mess up our budget talk. All right. Well, thank you.
I mean,
that's great.
in the evening, no problem. In the evenings here, we sometimes have multiple video streams going simultaneously. Yeah, I don't think getting for the problems for this fiscal year, which goes through June 30th, are not things that we should solve by hacking off parts of the government and letting people go.
Okay. So then we get into next year, and the mayor has said we will need a sharp increase in property taxes. You have supported an increase in property taxes the last 2 years. You are now chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee. My first question, do you feel like there will be a battle? Will it be tough to pass a property tax increase this year, or do you feel like everyone would pretty much agree we need to raise property taxes?
Well, I expect the usual and appropriate questions from the public about the need, but I feel confident that after the mayor explains the situation and we work through it in the council, there is not a way to have next year's budget work without a property tax rate increase. There's not enough firing that we could do and still maintain city services without a property tax rate increase next year.
Have you begun to think what that increase might be? I saw the mayor say something about 20% if there's not help from the federal government. What would be, what are the parameters you're looking at this point?
Well, I think the mayor said at least 20%, and we, all of us who are around the budget, are staying closely tuned to what's going on in Washington. The next deal that's coming out of D.C. this week does not have any new money for cities to make up lost revenue, and it appears that there's no agreement between the parties for a future deal that would do that. So we're going to have to do the budget from the perspective that we don't have money coming from the federal government to make up for lost sales tax revenue, lost hotel revenue. So it's going to, even if you wanted to have sharp cuts, if you wanted to close libraries for a couple of days a week, shut down community centers, close parks, kill off the affordable housing funding. If you wanted to do all those things, you'd still have to raise the rate more, I think, than 20%. I think to be able to avoid those sort of dramatic things that I just mentioned, you'd have to be more in the range of 30, 35, 40. I mean, it's horrible to talk about, but those are the choices. 40% tax increase to maintain most of what we have in government, or 20 or 30% and get rid of a bunch of services that we currently provide.
So these are terrible options. People are not going to be excited to pay 20% more and see massive cuts, and no one's going to be excited about paying 40% more. And so how do you think that's going to play out? How do you come to people many people that are struggling, that have been laid off, and ask for a 40% property tax increase?
Well, the horrible part is whether you're talking about the rate increase or you're talking about the reducing services, the people who are least able to afford the taxes are also the ones who are least able to afford the reduction of city services. People who are better off, who are in a position financially to pay the higher taxes, don't necessarily use as many government services as people who are struggling to make ends meet and relying on, say, affordable housing funding or libraries or community centers for after-school care. So either way, it probably impacts the same people the worst. And I'm coming into this, the mayor's going to propose a budget. I don't know exactly what's in it. I, as Budget and Finance Committee Chair, may propose a different one with a different set of trade-offs, just really to drive a debate. I think actually the mayor and I could get on the same page about something to propose, I think, but I may want to propose something different just to make sure we could have a public discussion about, what the balance between tax rate and service cuts.
It sounds like the debate will center around, obviously, how much of a property tax increase there should be. And I guess the other thing that we would really be focused on is exactly what might need to be cut. I mean, do you think those would be the major things that would be debated?
I think so. And listen, it is absolutely possible that we could get into one budget conversation, which we're required to start by May 1st under the Metro Charter. And then by the time we get to June, there could be federal legislation that changes things, and we'd be in a different discussion. Like one of the things that decision making during a crisis is one of the only things we know today is that things are going to change probably dramatically in a relatively short period of time. We've all been living that. Once we start the budget conversation at the beginning of May, whatever those circumstances are, we probably are going to have to be discussing trade-offs of rate, how much rate versus how much services to cut back.
The mayor was talking about the
hopefully,
right. The mayor was talking about the cavalry coming in, and that's the federal government. How optimistic are you that the federal government will pass something that would give money to cities, specifically money to us, that would help Nashville right now?
Well, hope's not a strategy, and we've already been through 4 or 5 relief packages out of D.C. And money for cities to make up for lost sales and other tax revenue has not been included in any of the packages, so I cannot sit around hoping that the cavalry comes over the hill. We have to make a plan. I just don't know. I mean, at some point, you wonder how many trillions of dollars can the government materialize. I think the relief packages are already in excess, well in excess of the 2008, 2009 relief packages.
When we're looking at next year's budget, and I guess finishing off this year, let's assume everything goes really well, and obviously the governor's talking about opening things up beginning May 1st. The mayor is talking about slowly opening things up, I guess, beginning in May. Let's say we're up and running here fairly soon. How big of a help would that be? I mean, I guess at what point do we need to be up and running for some of these things you're talking about to be lowered? When you're talking about that kind of a huge property tax increase, are you talking about everything working perfectly? In other words, the city being back up and running in mid-May or June? And what if it goes beyond that? That's my question.
Well, I think it's prudent to plan for things to take slower than that to get back to normal. I mean, I think it's easy to see, well, obviously CMA Fest isn't going to happen. That's not going to be normal. If anybody was betting whether the 4th of July celebration downtown was going to be a fraction of quote unquote normal, I think we'd all say probably not. You start sliding into the fall. Do we think the New Year's Eve celebration is going to be the same? Is the bowl game going to be the same? I think most people betting right now would say, God, I hope that the New Year's Eve and the bowl game are close to normal, but that would be fantastic. That would feel like a best case scenario. I think the mayor's budget, it's been a while since I've heard details about this, but I think the mayor's budget will have revenue assumptions that assume we get back to some sort of normal revenue for the city by the 1st of next year. And frankly, the big wild card on that is whether we have another big outbreak in the fall that just pushes everything back down again. But I think the mayor's budget is going to have revenue assumptions assuming pretty, back to normal by January 1.
By January 1. All right, Metro employees have been promised, pay raises. Obviously, a lot has changed, but do you think that will be a goal to fund the pay raises, to fund the teacher raises, or is the goal just to keep employees, not mass furloughs and not laying people off? Where do you go as far as pay raises and that kind of thing for Metro employees and for education and the like?
Well, let's start with Metro employees. Metro employees got told over the last several years when we were having good times that they needed to tighten their belts, wait until next year. And so basically, whether it's good times or bad times, Metro employees are getting told over and over and over again to wait their turn. And so there's no question that getting fair compensation for Metro employees is very high up on the goal list. There is not a lot of fat in Metro government. Metro employees work really hard serving all of us. As far as what's practical, I view it in goal number one is avoid furloughs and layoffs. Goal number two is I know that the cost of insurance for employees is going up, and I'd like to keep that from feeling that in their pocketbook. So at least making them even on that. And then if there's a way to get more compensation, whether it's cost of living or step increases beyond that, then that's a goal. But to me, the minimum goals are avoiding furloughs and layoffs and trying to make it so they don't feel the cost of insurance increase from their own pockets.
And what about Metro schools? What's the goal?
Well, Metro schools, due to really obtuse and difficult state law, is complex. There's a concept called maintenance of effort under state law, which is supposed to make it so cities don't take advantage of the state. And the maintenance of effort, as I understand it, means that a city has to budget the same for a school system as it did in the previous year. So even though our revenue is going to be way down, I believe I'm expecting to see that the budgeted line item for what Metro will spend on schools next year will be the same as the current year. And so that hopefully makes it easier for the school system to be able to plan for this upcoming year.
Okay, we're going to take a break. That kind of sets the table. We have several calls and a couple lines open. If you want to call in, there's the number 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Talking all about the Metro budget. I'll take a break. Be back right after this.